The Space Wolves have become one of the most iconic chapters of Space Marines, with a wide range of Black Library books, one of the largest amounts of custom models, and an expansive lore that has woven through almost every major conflict of the Imperium in ways that I'd argue is only matched by the Ultramarines. From a personal standpoint, the Space Wolves were, as I've mentioned, the first 40k army I ever collected, and the lore of one of their most renowned characters stretches back deep into my own childhood. With the Psychic Awakening series continuing into what is hopefully a 9th edition of Warhammer 40,000, we have just received new lore for the Space Wolves in the Saga of the Beast, which covers the grand clash between the Wolves of Fenris and the Orcs once more. Today we're going to discuss one of the main characters of that saga with Ragnar Blackmane, the youngest and one of the mightiest heroes of the Space Wolves. Commanding the Blackmane's great company, Ragnar's history is covered in 6 grand novels, 4 of which are written by William King, of Gotrek and Felix fame, and mark some of the best novels of the early Black Library days. Ragnar's personality is that of an overly charismatic great wolf that has created a grand legacy through the stars with countless victories. But his tale is also marred with strife, failure, and a great deal of shortcomings that make the character well-rounded and full of vitality. We'll be covering some of those failures, some of those accomplishments, and culminating in bringing you up to speed with the most recent lore of Ragnar as he has most recently crossed the Rubicon Primaris in his grand struggle against Ghazghkull. So hunker down and let's pour through one of the greatest wolf lords of Fenris. Our tale doesn't start with Ragnar already clad in power armor, but rather among the tribespeople of the volatile Fenrisian landscape. Fenris is a death world unlike most of the others. Its constantly shifting tectonic plates give way to massive islands being swallowed under the waves, or new ones being born every handful of years. The people of Fenris are a stocky sort, living their lives in small coastal villages and sailing the seas in longboats, battling krakens and other sea monsters, while also raiding other tribes. A young Ragnar belonged to one such tribe, the Thunderfists, granting the young barbarian his initial surname, Ragnar Thunderfist. From an early age, Ragnar was fighting amongst the other tribe's warriors in hunting packs and honor duels with people twice his size and age. But from the very start, he was already kind of marked for excellence. For the tribespeople of Fenris, the greatest glory was to have your death witnessed by what they called the Sky Warriors. If you were deemed worthy, the legends told of how they would scoop you up to fight amongst the stars. Ragnar's chance to join the Sky Warriors came with the ensuing raid by a rival tribe, the Grimskulls. They ravaged their way through the Thunderfists, killing a large portion of men, women, and children, including Ragnar's own family. This sent the young Thunderfist into a berserker rage, where he blew through a swath of invaders like a Jersey Shore bro blows through hood rats. His rage was met by Stribbjorn Grimskull. Caught in a wild duel, the two exchanged blows rapidly before Ragnar was able to deal a mortal wound to the Grimskull, with another one being dealt back to the Thunderfist in a kind. As the two collapsed, Ragnar witnessed a Sky Warrior descending to scoop him up before blacking out from his wounds. The wolf priest Rannik Icewalker deemed both youths worthy of becoming neophytes of the Space Wolves, and they were brought aboard Rannik's ship and delivered to the Fang. William King's first book, Space Wolf, paints a really detailed description of Ragnar experiencing them traveling to the Fang and his first impressions of the towering mountain fortress, as well as the massive architectural achievements that mark the entryway to the monastery. Proceeding through the Rusvik training camp and all the way to the gates of Morkai, Ragnar had to pass a number of both psychological and physical tests to see if he was fit to become a Space Marine and be granted the gene seed of their sire, Leman Russ. We talked about some of the shortcomings of Ragnar in the intro to this video, and one of his biggest ones is also kind of one of his biggest strengths, that berserker rage that Rannik witnessed in the Thunderfist camp. This rage will rear its head throughout the history of Ragnar, either saving or damning him as he acts impetuously and is rather hot-headed. In fact, that rage and the deep-seated hate for Stribbjorn almost cost Ragnar his status as a member of the Space Wolves. At the gates of Mordkai, the minds of the Neophytes are probed by the wolf priests to find any hint of taint. You know, as a kind of quick aside, this might be why the Space Wolves typically have some of the lowest renegade chapters in their gene seed, or I guess in their overall chapter. They do have like 1 or 2, but this initial kind of probing might overall reduce that, or at least discover that taint. And who knows, and that's a little bit of speculation, but it's worth kind of bringing up. But Ragnar almost gave in to the wolf within him, slavering to become a berserk mad fool, lost to his own emotions. But Ragnar resisted, and thus was deemed worthy to drink from the cup of Wolfen. Ragnar and the other Neophytes were then brought to the Vanaheim Mountains, and kicked out of the gunship before being told to find their way back to the Fang, or die trying. This is the final and the hardest trial for the Neophytes, as they have been implanted with the Khani's helix, but have not yet fully adapted and have yet to undergo the rest of the surgeries to become a Space Marine. This is referred to as the Test of Mordkai, or the Blooding. Throughout Ragnar's trial, he was hunted by a Fenrisian wolf, a black one to be exact, a large and vicious breed of native wolf that is seen as near impossible for an aspirant to kill on their own. Naked, freezing, and starving, Ragnar persevered, outwitting the wolf and eventually killing it, dragging its corpse all the way back to the Fang with him. In doing so, he skinned it and wore it as a mantle throughout his many years of being a space wolf, and it kind of gave him that moniker, Ragnar Blackmane, right? And most of the novels are told as a means of a flashback sequence, while Ragnar is in reverie during kind of like a stall in between one of his countless campaigns. I actually think that this story of him killing the wolf is then cut back to him like petting his own wolves, which we'll get to in a little bit. His wolves have a really kind of cool dichotomy between him and Leman Russ, so we'll get to that in just a bit. But rising to the rank of Bloodclaw, the first rank among the Space Wolves, Ragnar's first task was to investigate the disappearance of another pack of Bloodclaws somewhere on Fenris. Of course, Ragnar was not the sergeant of this pack, as they are mostly led by a Grey Hunter, an older space wolf who tempers and controls the wild battle fervor of the Bloodclaws. In this case, it was the Grey Hunter who trained the wolf pack through their many trials and drills, Sergeant Hakon. A portion of the pack went and investigated a cave deep in the mountains, where they unearthed a shrine to chaos and a cult of Tzeentch accompanied by Thousand Sons Space Marines led by Maddox, the Chaos Sorcerer. Half the Bloodclaw pack was killed, with Ragnar, Stribbjorn, Sven, a newly forged friendship of Ragnar's, and 2 other pack members being the only ones left. Ragnar commanded the pack to leave and get help from the Fang while he confronted the sorcerer. Stribbjorn accompanied Ragnar, despite their initial animosity growing to somewhat of a tense brotherhood through the combined struggle of their trials. The 2 squared off against Maddox, Stribbjorn being wounded in the process but eventually killing the sorcerer, or so they thought. This character would go on to become a recurring annoyance to Ragnar through the many novels and histories of his past. Now, I don't want to cover every single book in depth in this video, because I think that the latter portions of his life are really the juicy ones that most people came here for. But I will touch on the remainder of the books in a bit of a quicker synopsis, because they are also integral to how Ragnar became the leader of his own great company. So after his exploits under the caves of Fenris, Ragnar and his pack had earned a good deal of fame for saving Fenris from a possible Thousand Sons invasion. This placed his pack firmly within the great company of Beric Thunderfist, but that would not come to fruition until after this next tale. Also, as a quick kind of aside, Beric's surname is because of his massive power fist built into his cybernetic arm replacement that he got or earned after losing it in a duel to the mighty Karn the Betrayer. Just in general, the surname of a space wolf is usually attributed to some form of physical trait. This is obviously not the case with someone like Logan Grimnar, but Blackmane, Fell-Handed, Thunderfist, so on and so forth, they're usually, or most of them are all linked to some form of physical trait. But moving on, shortly after the destruction of Maddox, 2 Inquisitors arrive on Fenris, Ivan Sternberg and Kara Eisen. The 2 of them recount to Logan Grimnar how the Talisman of Lycos, an ancient Eldar amulet, can be used to save the planet of Arius, which was riddled with a mysterious plague. Arius itself was once the site to a grand battle between Imperial Guard elements, Space Wolves, and the Inquisition fighting the Eldar in a large structure dubbed the Black Pyramid. The talisman had been split into 3 pieces, one of which laying dormant in the Fang, another on the planet of Galt, and the last piece lost on a space hulk somewhere adrift in the warp. That last piece might seem tricky to find, but don't worry, plot holes always save the day in Warhammer. But one thing of note about Kara Eisen, there's something of a romance that brews between her and Ragnar. Arguably, one of the few times we see a true romance grow between a space marine and a human that isn't dismissed as non-marine feelings. Sort of what we get through the Horus Heresy with some of the characters that interact with remembrancers kind of saying, oh, those are non-marine feelings, I can't feel that. Although Ragnar does remark that it's un-wolf-like, that he should ignore these feelings due to the dichotomy of these two individuals, their respective stations, and also, him being a space marine. So I guess it does ultimately get dismissed as non-marine feelings in the end, but it's still an intriguing plot point that William King explored to kind of show you how the romance between space marines and non-space marines works, and more importantly, how it would work for space wolves, which are kind of seen as these, Kievan Rus or overly Viking style of Space Marine chapter, right? With all the, we're going to go out, raid, pillage, rape, burn, all that action, whatever. But this is how he kind of dismisses that whole portion of, I guess you could say, the carnal side of what would be expected from that storyline. But let's get back on point here. The remainder of Ragnar's pack, their Sergeant Haken, and the 2 Inquisitors all head out in search of the 2 missing pieces of the talisman. On the planet of Galt, the pack uses subterfuge to infiltrate to the top of a large building past a swarming horde of orcs. There they confront an orc war boss who, in the initial portions of the fight, kills Lars, a member of the Bloodclaw pack. If memory serves me right, I think he was tossed from the building. Like, I think the orc war boss just chucked him. But despite this, the pack was able to bring the boss down and escape before being overwhelmed. Using the other pieces, Inquisitor Eisen was able to divine the presence of the third, on board a space hulk around the dying sun of Coriolis. Retrieving the third piece and returning to Arius, the party was shocked to discover that the entire planet had become infected by the plague. No amount of shelter-in-place orders could help from the rot of Papa Nurgle, which to me, it seems like, this was obviously a thing of Nurgle, but as they infiltrated the Black Pyramid, they discovered that a great unclean one named Bachelaz had been orchestrating the corruption throughout the planet and pulling the strings of the planetary defense forces. In the ensuing conflict, Nils, another pack member, was killed along with Inquisitor Sternberg. Ragnar's nascent romance was crushed when Kara Eisen drew the Great Unclean One within herself to help give the Space Wolves a chance to escape, while also sealing the Black Pyramid with both inside. Ragnar had carved quite a name for himself in the small handful of years that he had been a part of the Space Wolves. That would come under fire in his next adventure on the Shrine World of Garm. Named after the very first Wolf Lord that followed Leman Russ into the stars upon the Emperor's discovery of Fenris, Garm was a holy site to the Space Wolves. It was here that Leman Russ and Magnus fought in a bloody duel. Magnus stood over Leman Russ triumphantly before Garm was able to snatch up the Spear of Russ, created on the very Shrine world that they stood, to wound the Sorcerer King. Angered by this futile act, Magnus incinerated Garm instantly, but it gave Leman Russ the chance to recover and beat back his brother, winning the day. And from that moment on, the planet was split between a holy site for the Space Wolves, as a resting place of the sacred Spear of Russ, and a holy site for the Thousand Sons, the 2 legions' antithesis to one another. The Spear of Russ was said to be the greatest artifact that the Space Wolves possessed, and it was the spear that Leman Russ would take up during the prophesied Wolf Times, when the Wolf of Wolves would return to his sons for the final battle. Garm itself is defended by a permanent attachment of Space Wolves, but the Thousand Sons sorcerer Maddox had caused a planet-wide cultist insurrection, with a massive uprising that threatened to overtake the planet. Using this as a cover, he stole the Spear of Russ from its resting place for a fell ritual. 11 great companies of the Space Wolves mobilized to fight back the Thousand Sons and reclaim their lost relic. Throughout the entire conflict, Ragnar wove through cultist and traitor alike until finally squaring off with his nemesis, Maddox. Now, there's a lot of staunch parallels between Ragnar Blackmane and Maddox, and Leman Russ and Magnus, probably because they follow the same naming mechanic of first name, last name versus singular name, but jokes aside, they both represent their gene sires in so many ways that I believe that was intentional for William King, or of William King. Especially when we get into stuff like Ragnar as a wolf lord, always going into battle with his Fenrisian wolves, Svangir and Ulfgir, just like Leman Russ was accompanied by Freki and Giri. Regardless, Ragnar interrupted Maddox's ritual, which was aimed at using the energy that lay dormant in the Spear of Russ to bring Magnus the Red back into the material plane. During their duel, Ragnar was able to grab the spear and hurl it into the warp portal that Magnus was about to climb through. Blowing up the portal, he ended the ritual, but lost the most sacred relic of the Space Wolves, and this caused quite the rift through the chapter. Logan Grimnar and Beric Thunderfist truly believe that Ragnar acted in the right and ultimately saved the chapter from a catastrophic event. Many of the wolf priests and other great wolves saw it as a sacrilege. Some demanded that the pup pay in blood by having the blood eagle carved on his back. Others believed that he should be exiled. Ultimately, Logan Grimnar decided to send Ragnar off to Terra to serve in the Wolf Blade, a band of space wolves that would act as an honor guard to the Navigator House of Belisarius. This was a 10 millennia old pact that had been forged by Leman Russ himself in the early days of the Great Crusade. So while it was an exile, it was an honor in its own way. Ragnar accepted this punishment, but it still ate away at him. During the Garm uprising, Sergeant Hakon had been killed, and both Sven and Stribbjorn had been promoted to Grey Hunters. So while this occupies his mind on the transit and during the initial days of landing on Terra, it quickly gets washed away with the new intrigue for the Navigator House and Ragnar. And it's honestly one of the best books of the series in my opinion, because it goes into the rampant corruption, but also the sprawling landscape of Terra itself. I mean, you find out about so much in a time during the Warhammer 40,000 history that wasn't very common, about exploring Terra and the machinations of all the inner workings of the politics and how, like, actually geographically it was put together. I mean, that was kind of very unheard of for the time. Majority of that information came from stuff like Visions of Heresy or some of the older books that kind of went into the more, I don't want to say mystical, but the more enigmatic portions of the Great Crusade lore, which was more mentioned in scant little portions here and there. It's not the fully fleshed out legacy that we have from the Horus Heresy books. You have to remember, this is from a time in the lore well beyond, or I'm sorry, well before that. So stuff is, again, very kind of, I guess, behind the veil in a kind of ways. But you find out again about racial purists that find the Navigators as a base mutation and abhorrent, even though, you know, the Navigators were created during the golden age of technology, but that's neither here nor there. But Ragnar thwarts an assassination attempt on Lady Gabriella Belisarius, one of the daughters of the head of the household. In defeating an Imperial assassin, Ragnar is gifted with the Frostblade Frostfang, the iconic sword that he carries to this day in both his old and new artwork. As the plot unfolds, Ragnar travels to the planet of Hades, Hyades, a holdfast of the Space Wolves with Lady Gabriella. There he is caught up in another plot to capture one of the Dark Angel's fallen angels named Cadmus. This was actually orchestrated by Maddox to try and pick the old wound between wolf and lion that existed from the time of the Great Crusade. And it's worth noting that at the time of the writing of this series, the rivalry between Dark Angels and Space Wolves was one that was more often than not came to outright aggression. In today's lore, it's more animosity and less warfare. I believe in the most recent Space Wolves Codex, it talks about the honor duel that the chapters hold between their two champions is almost a time to kind of reconcile old friendships. And this is worth explaining before we go on, because Captain Jeremiah Gaius led a Deathwing kill team to Hyades, assaulting the planet with their Space Marine battle barge. Ragnar was caught up in a struggle between the Dark Angels and a routine patrol of Space Wolves led by none other than Beric Thunderfist. The battle did not last long before involvement of the Thousand Sun sorcerer was discovered, and the two chapters reconciled to bring Cadmus in, where he was executed by the Dark Angels, who then retreated from the system. So you can see that this book is very nested. It's got a lot of stuff going on for it. And Ragnar was then brought before Logan Grimnar for a debriefing and discussed yet another plot that they had unearthed. Maddox was attempting to resurrect Magnus once again, and this would all take place on the planet of Charis. Pledging to find the Spear of Rus, Ragnar and his Wolfblades were dispatched to Charis. Beric Thunderfist and his great company joining in the Alpha Strike on the cultists and their Thousand Sons leadership. In the ensuing attack, Beric and his Wolfguard were caught in a vicious trap that gravely wounded the Wolf Lord and killed most of his Wolfguard. Beric was lost to the Red Dream, a sort of coma that was induced by the heavy trauma, but one that Beric would not wake from. This prompted Lady Gabriella to aid Ragnar and his Wolfblades in traveling to the newly discovered Shadow Copy of Charis, where they were aided by elements of the 13th Great Company, the Lost Great Company, in destroying the cursed ritual enacted by Maddox. Ending the ritual and discovering that Maddox was preventing Beric from awakening, Ragnar was able to recover the spear and save his Wolf Lord. Beric had awoken just in time to prevent his own death at the hands of one of his Wolfguard, who had actually fallen victim to the Curse of the Wolfen by Maddox's curse. It's actually pretty epic. He commands the Wolfen that he remembers the oaths he swore, and it just stops the beast dead in its tracks. It's a pretty little epic moment, but this entire act reconciled Ragnar's past on Garm, and he was allowed back into the Great Company, where he was appointed the status of Wolfguard after single-handedly killing Orc warlord Borzag Khan and his entire Nob's retinue. And this was unprecedented, as he jumped from Bloodclaw, skipped Grey Hunter, and went straight to Wolfguard. But Ragnar's life has been a series of unprecedented acts thus far. This was no different. Shortly after his ascension to Wolfguard, Beric Thunderfist fell at the hands of Gorok's Bloodfist, the champion of chaos. This enraged Ragnar, as most things do, and he vowed to get revenge for the death of his Wolf Lord and mentor. Hunting the champion down, he slew him in single combat and was then elevated to the rank of Wolf Lord, taking command of Beric's Great Company and renaming it the Blackmanes. In this, Ragnar would not be found wanting, as he created a name for himself as a master of orbital drops and lightning-fast strikes into the heart of the enemy. His alarmingly high success rate has led Logan Grimnar, the Great Wolf of the Space Wolves, to employ Ragnar in any major invasion that demands decisive blitz towards the enemy's leadership. Throughout the many years, Ragnar has crafted his legacy through notable campaigns such as the Magdalene Incursion, battles with the Dark Eldar, orcs, and countless engagements against the traitor legions. In the closing years of the 41st millennium, Ragnar was instrumental in retrieving many of the newly rediscovered 13th Great Company in a massive campaign known as the Hunt for the Wolfen. Upon the demon world of Dragos, Ragnar battled his way through jungles and unimaginable terrors to save his brethren, and also bring a number of stranded Adeptus Mechanicus elements back to the Emperor's Light from the stranded demon planet. And as we enter the narrative of the Saga of the Beast and the growing scope of the Dark Imperium that we're currently embroiled in, we see Ragnar going along a number of quests and tasks similar to what Leman Russ did in the days before his confrontation with Magnus. Within the Underverse, as it is called, Ragnar encounters a seer that tells him of the prophecy of the wolf. Essentially, the prophecy illustrates that Ragnar must meet and defeat Gazkul Mag Uruk Thraka. It's all very cryptic, and as you might expect in a location known as the Underverse, and the seer visually ages the more she divulges to Ragnar. Returning from his spirit journey, Ragnar heads out on his hunt for Gazkul. Now, it's important to note that at this time, the orcs are running wild throughout the Imperium. The Cicatrix Maledictum has granted the orcs with an amazing amount of opportunities to fight bigger and badder enemies, and this galvanizes them to new heights. I mean, they go after a bunch of the traitor legions, all these demons, all these things actually kind of, for like one of the only races at the time, is the only race that's like, oh man, this is great, this is awesome, I'm loving it. So the Psychic Awakening book is filled with conflict after conflict between the Space Wolves and the Orcs. The orcs' weird boy magic having been empowered even more so than normal by their foray into the Eye of Terror, discovering that if chaos can exit, they can enter. And we'll save a lot of the information for the G.Skills video that we're going to do, but needless to say, Ragnar discovers G.Skills, the beast, upon the planet of Krongar. There, a battle erupts with Ragnar attempting to use his orbital drop capabilities to perform a lightning strike on the beast, severing the head, quite literally. G.Skills is waiting for this engagement though. He wants it to happen. He also knows about the prophecy of the wolf and wants it to unfold. From what he knows of the prophecy, it will consume the galaxy in a green tide, causing the Great Waw that will allow for the time of the orc to finally come. And I mean, this prophecy is so potent that even the Thousand Sons try and stop Ragnar from reaching Krongar, attacking his strike force en route. Fortunately, or unfortunately, we don't know yet, their plan fails and Ragnar makes planetfall, eager to take out G.Skills and complete his destiny. Ragnar and his Wolfguard square off against G.Skills, fighting in a bitter melee that sees members of the Wolfguard killed before the war boss triggers a massive explosion that allows for waves of orcs to swarm the Space Wolves. Sequestered from his forces and facing the largest orc in the known Imperium, Ragnar met his foe with the grace and tenacity he has shown throughout his life. Blow after blow is meted out against one another, Ragnar's lightning-fast strikes scoring thousands of cuts, with the lumbering swings of G.Skills each taking a slamming toll upon Ragnar and his armor. By the end of the fight, Ragnar leaps into the air, shooting bolter shells into the orc's face at point-blank range. He is caught mid-leap by the crushing claw of the beast, and as he closes the clamping jaws of his fist, Ragnar severs the orc's head. Both Ragnar and G.Skills are beaten to a pulp. Ragnar's last act, before succumbing to his wounds, is holding up the head of G.Skills. But rather than a sneering death glare, the orc war boss is smiling, knowing his prophecy has come to fruition. Ragnar is immediately transported upon his ship, where he undergoes emergency surgery to cross the Rubicon Primaris as the only means of saving him. The 3 new additional organs being the only things to help his broken body heal from all of the grievous wounds. Becoming the first Primaris character of the Space Wolves, Ragnar has returned in full fighting duty, but is shocked at the discovery that G.Skills has also returned and is equally as bigger and badder than he was before. Furious, Ragnar orchestrates bringing an orbital station down upon Krongar to try and kill his new foe. In the ensuing hunt, G.Skills manages to escape the destruction from the orbital station and actually, at some point, ends up killing Ragnar's wolves, Svangir and Ulfgir, which is honestly the biggest goddamn tragedy of this entire story. In short, the Psychic Awakening narrative gives us a rejuvenated enemy in the orcs for the Space Wolves. Now, this isn't a new foe. The Space Wolves have been a part of almost every major war of Armageddon, from the first to the last. And as you well know, Armageddon was moved from its original location and renamed, hoping to trick the orcs who are otherwise drawn to it. You might remember it from the Horus Heresy series known as Ulanor Prime. As the story unfolds for the Warhammer 40,000 universe, we will continue to see where the Space Wolves are brought to throughout the Imperium Sanctus and Imperium Nihilus. But with the newly gene-crafted Ragnar Blackmane, you can be sure that the wild howls of the Blackmane Great Company will be heard deep into the Wolf time, with the hopeful return of their gene sire, Leman Russ. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video here today. Ragnar Blackmane has had a very fleshed out history from a lot of the amazing authors that have breathed life into his lore throughout the years. William King was arguably the king of Space Wolves back in the day. That title has since passed into the more recent publications. Chris Wright has done an amazing job of bringing the current Space Wolves into the modern day publications. So if you haven't gotten a chance to pick up any of his books that revolve around either Space Wolves or the White Scars, I strongly encourage it. You won't be disappointed. And I mean, if you actually take a look at the heraldry of the Space Wolves, as you know on the Codex, that singular wolf head on the on the yellow field is the sign of Ragnar's Blackmanes, his great company. So the kind of, I guess you could say, Codex standard form or portrait of a Space Wolf is Ragnar Blackmane's own company. So that's actually a kind of an interesting little tidbit there. But as always, guys, thank you so much. yet again for watching today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that fun action. I will be following this video up with a version for G.Skills. Either way, I'm excited to do more of these kind of updated lore videos for the characters that are finally getting covered in this big Psychic Awakening. My big goal in the future is to cover both Fabius Bile and the supposed or the rumored Necron Pariahs, and we'll kind of see how that unfolds as we get closer and closer to the launch of the War of the Spider. But again, guys, as always, have a good one and take care.